What is going on, everybody? My name is Greg, and this is Gregsaidhey, a channel where I talk about a bunch of stuff that I've been working on or just ran across that I think you might enjoy. Today, I'll be talking about RPGs, specifically two RPGs that I have worked on or are working on. These are completely indie, number one, and number two, it's completely house ruled. Meaning that if I were to say, oh, this thing does X, Y, and Z, if you play that system, you know that it doesn't do X, Y, and Z. You know what all they do is X and Y. But for the purposes of cool and also, saying yes more, I've changed things or made things up or fudged things in a way that is good for storytelling as well as game plan. The first RPG that I came up with was a survival horror theme, and in this survival horror theme, some people would be on a country road in 1985, and some things would happen. They would end up at this house thinking that they're saved, but it turns out to be a haunted house that traps them inside, and then they have to survive and do a bunch of things in order to get out. My inspiration for making this was I've been into RPGs for a while, listening to them mostly because if I were to try to play an RPG, that's why this RPG kind of fizzled. There's nobody to really play it with. Everybody else is, married with kids or working or in school or doing God knows what. And, and a lot of people, it's not their cup of tea. It happens to be my cup of tea. And that's why I came up with a real homebrew RPG that is horror themed. Some things to note about this RPG, because I can't go into everything here because that would take an hour. But the combat system was based off of a deck of cards. You had attack and defense and weapon damage, and things of that nature. You had stats to modify it in some way, but instead of rolling dice, you would use cards because of two reasons. One, I know that we had a deck of cards, and two, because it didn't involve dice. I got two nieces. Whenever I see their father, who's my brother, whenever I see him, I'm usually seeing them, and if they're around, I probably don't want to be rolling dice because they'll want to take the dice. And eventually it ends up in somebody's mouth. I don't know why, it just happens. So both pluses there. And I wanted to play a co-op game. Even if I had to run it, I wanted to play a co-op game that I didn't have to go out and buy. I didn't have to learn a new system. And I could probably grab anybody and say, okay, this is how things go. You do this, you tell me what you want to do, and then I'll tell you if it works or not. Real simple stuff. Now, I took the concept of standard RPGs where you have strength, dex, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and I condensed it down to strength, wisdom, agility, and guts. SWAG, swag. Now, using the swag system, it will give you the advantage of having less numbers on your page, definitive modifiers to where I add this, and Bob's your uncle. And it added a simple element of randomness, and also it will be like a time-based thing, because after the deck runs out and you shuffle it and put it back together again, that's less time on the clock. I figure every time you reshuffle it, that's like an hour lost. So if you have like 3 or 4 people playing, and they're all drawing cards, and they're all making attacks, and they're all defending and whatnot, the deck is going to go by really fast. So I figured that could be a balancing mechanic. But I went through the trouble of making characters, items, weapons, maps. Not so much maps, but like a map to where it gave you like a floor plan that said, oh, this is the foyer or foyer for all you people who parlez-vous français. This is the dining room, and you could get like an idea of places that you've been, places that you haven't been, which is another thing that bothered me about choose your own adventure novels sometimes, is that you get so far in the book and it's either A or B, and you're not sure whether to do A or B, but you take A and then you're like, oh, I should have chose B. And it's a linear track that has a bunch of branching paths. I like the idea of having, be like, oh, well, what's over in this direction? You go over here. Okay, that's nothing. Let's go back this way. But there were boss fights and traps that could trigger and things of that nature. All the things that I think would be suspenseful for like a Halloween-based game, because this was months ago that I started piecing this thing together. Way before it was October, which it's October now. And even before then, I knew that I wasn't going to get to run it about now. So I kind of shelved the idea. But I still have all my notes from the RPG, and I still have all the material that went along with it. And it was just something that I threw together over about a week's time. I think it was about a week. But yeah, it was going to be simple, and it was going to be a jumping off point to get some of my people in on RPGs, because I don't think that that's something that is very popular where I'm from. But anyway, that was the RPG that I was fiddling around with. That was a while ago. Fast forward to now, I spent like the last week or maybe a little bit less than that, less than a month for sure, working on a newer RPG. It was using the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition rule set, but I didn't want to get people together and be like, okay, this is what we're doing. You're playing a paladin, you're playing a rogue, you're playing a cleric, you're playing a bard. Go. I've listened to and watched probably 4 or 5 hours of D&D RPG stuff. Everything from Critical Role and Crit Juice to High Rollers to the Penny Arcade stuff, including the podcasts, Dice Camera Action for sure. And I can picture a lot of this stuff in my head now to where it's like, oh, if I want to make a character that's like this, I can do that. But to the lay person, they don't want to play a bard. They want to play, like a superhero. So I figure I could make I could make a superhero and put it into D&D. Now, instead of just reskinning something, I'm trying to balance everything, because I'm talking some weird people that would never, ever, 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 ever be hanging out, let alone in the same universe as one another, all fighting on the same side. You got Harry Potter, you got Iron Man, you got X-Men, which is just 4 of them, because I don't feel like making like a whole squad. And I'm pretty sure Rogue would be a really hard person to make if you included the whole steal ability thing. But it would be Cyclops, Gambit, Storm, and Wolverine. And Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Part of which is from nostalgia, part of which is because I saw the trailer and I was like, yeah, all right. And also Goku. Now I had to think about like some of this because I'm new to uh, the statistical part of rebalancing stuff and making things. So I actually had to go and look up a bunch of stuff. I still have to look up things for encounters and uh, layouts. I have to paint all this stuff in, including all the details. But I'm doing all the bare bones work now. Like I have level 1 character sheets for everything I just named off of just now. And now I have to go and be able to level up all these people. But I wanted to give them a variety of things to choose from. So that way they could choose something that they would be interested in. And then if they're invested in that part alone, they'll listen to the rest of it. This RPG that I'm working on now is sort of like Ready Player One, for those of you who either listened to or read that when it came out. There's a lot of 80s nostalgia in that. They have a Dungeons and Dragons bit in there. They have a thing with war games in there. They have a thing with Monty Python in there. I thought that was really cool. Not all of that is my jam, though. My jam was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It was Dragon Ball Z. It was Masked Rider a little bit. Only a little bit of Masked Rider. But all those 90s things. And I figure I can take all of that garbled mess and make sense out of it enough for an RPG. Fingers crossed. Now, eventually, when we do run this amalgam of everything I can think of combo game, I'm going to record it as a podcast and probably post it on this channel here. So, if you watched this far, thank you for watching. Thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing, all that stuff. And if you found anything out that I've said thus far interesting, let me know down in the comment section. And yeah, that's basically it. This has been Greg saying, hey, take it easy, people. Peace.